so beautiful. I'm gonna stay.
Good luck.
In films, from the very beginning, people wanted to show stuff you cannot see in real life. That's the secret of these visual effect movies.
I've driven every vehicle you can think of away from every disaster you can think of, and run to and from every vehicle and disaster you can think of.
I can't visualize as large as this movie is. Anything that I could imagine pales into insignificance compared to what's actually being done.
I'd walk onto the set and it's like the size of California is in blue screen. I mean, there's just blue drapery everywhere.
It's fascinating. It feels a lot more like pretending than acting at times. It goes back to what we did as kids, which is there's nothing there and we're pretending there's something there. And it's kind of the reason most of us started in the first place. So it is a little bit of a throwback in that way.
It's like the old joke, the script, they say, you know, there's one line, and Rome burned. And you think, okay, that's one line of a page, but how do you shoot that? Every page had something like that in this movie. I don't think there's ever been a more ambitious scope for a movie. It just all seems like he's got it all in his head, and this amazing team that's worked it all out.
So, a lot of people who read the script said it's undoable. You know, and I always like that when people say that. It isn't, you know, because there's a solution for everything. But then they don't understand really that it's a lot of people in vehicles, which is doable in a way. Because what you do is you're just gonna put a RV on a gimbal and shoot him in front of blue screen and then shoot a couple of helicopter shots. And then the rest will be CG. And then it's like all of a sudden feasible, or an ash cloud is like kind of closing in on a plane. It's done in blue screen, it's not done in real. So that makes it feasible.
We all feel that you need to create a combination of real and green screen, real and pure computer-generated images. There's a certain tactile quality about movies with real big sets and real extras, and there's a difference between jumping on a green box and jumping on the real thing.
He's got massive sets built, and so you're really just talking about the rest of the horizon is the blue screen, but you're also actually acting on huge sets.
Very often with the movie, you're acting to one wall that is perfectly kind of Victorian or something, but then as soon as, if the camera kind of pans slightly to the right, it's, you know, you and me and this big thing here, but everything is complete, down to the last detail.
The objective is that you don't ultimately know what was built, what's shot practical, what's a visual effect. We draw the whole thing and conceive of the whole thing, and then talk very specifically with Roland, what do you need? And then we build models and we do little SketchUp so we can move through the space and talk about it.
The lines are actually drawn quite early in pre-production because we need to know budget-wise if it's going to be a physical effects or is it going to be a visual effects or is it going to be a combination of both. Roland, because of his experience, he's quite clear of what he likes to see real and where he thinks that it's best for the visual effects to take over. But basically anything that is like a real wide shot, there's no way you would see all the destruction, and we can't duplicate that kind of destruction. It would be a visual effects, and anything tighter than physical effects would take over.
When you see these blue screens, you have no idea. I mean, you have some idea from the renderings in the script what it's going to look like, but then there's this whole other army of people putting together this film with the computer stuff. It's pretty wild.
I did many movies with Volker Engel before in Germany. I love about him that he is like very methodical and very research oriented. He has a very incredible eye for what looks real.
It never seemed intimidating from the size because, let's put it this way, if it would be any other director and I would know, okay, I'm dealing with a director who might not know exactly what he wants or what's going to end up on the screen, and we have to do a lot of trial and error, I would be very nervous. But especially with the history that we have, there's the feeling of somebody is covering your back. We can go to him and say, listen, I mean, I know that we have these 20 shots here, but as it's planned right now, you probably need 10 additional ones. Can we talk about this? I mean, he's not going to be an egomaniac about that and say, like, I don't care how you guys do it. It needs to be done like that. There's an open conversation all the time. So that makes it better and makes us less nervous about the workload.
He is partnered with Mark Weigert. Mark Weigert is a guy who can do every one of these shots himself. So he's like kind of the technical part, the computer genius of the two.
One of the biggest challenges that we face is actually the sheer amount of challenges that are in this movie. Obviously, we have several different types of disasters that are happening. Earthquakes, floods, huge volcanic eruptions, almost atomic explosions. We have several different cities that are being destroyed, all different types of effects, and each one of these needs to be designed. We need to do research and development for things that have never been done before. So it's not a movie that's just about one single thing. We're saying, okay, if we just had an earthquake, for instance, it would be comparatively easy. It's still not easy, but comparatively easy because we were dealing with just one thing. And once you figure that one out, you can do it over and over again. In this movie, it's absolutely not possible. We figure one thing out and it's one scene. It's literally sometimes 3 lines in the script where it says, our heroes are driving through downtown as it crumbles.
These two together are like incredible people to have in your movie. For some years, they wanted to produce their own movies, and they produced some movies, and I couldn't have them. And this movie, I just had to talk them into it. I said, look, you have to do this.
One thing we talk about a lot actually in the early stages of pre-production is how to structure the size and the scale of all the events that are happening so that there's really a curve happening. It starts slow, more and more happens, more and more happens until the very end, and we don't start with something that's absolutely huge and then afterwards everything else is kind of disappointing afterwards. So you really have to spread it out.
One of the first scenes I have with Amanda, we're in a supermarket and we're having a little bit of a discussion about us and what is separating us at the moment. And then, in fact, the ground opens up and separates us. That's that subtle approach to relationship drama. This is what I mean by pulling us apart. But it's really kind of a fun scene. And I always love scenes like that, where you take this sort of really ordinary, we're kind of night shopping, and then wham, this thing hits.
I don't even know if there's any scene in the movie where we read it and thought that's going to be very easy to do. I think that like on every page we were thinking, oh, yeah, okay, we'll have to figure something out. Supermarket was that same way. What do we shoot for real? And that has a lot of implications because if you shoot something for real, at first you always have to think about how do you make it so it's safe for the actors? And the second thing is how can you make it so you can integrate that well later with the computer animation? So you really have to think about how do I approach this? What's the technology, what's the techniques behind it that I'm going to do? First it would be storyboarded, then the next thing is we would do a computer animated version of the entire scene. So you kind of have a very good blueprint.
They have extensive pre-visualizations where you can see the whole scene in a cartoon form. Previs, we call it. These previses, they become better and better. I mean, when I kind of compared them like 10 years ago, it was like only schematics, and now you can quite see how it will look.
We have really 3 different phases. The first phase happens really on the set, where you just have a couple of things shaking, maybe like a cornflakes package falling out of a shelf. Then we have a different setup where we show a lot more stuff falling and crumbling and so on, and that's where we already have our actors. They're just standing on, clinging to these little poles in front of a blue screen. Everything around them, behind them, is already computer generated. And then there's a third stage where we show the aftermath of the destruction, where you see a big, huge crevasse that actually went through the supermarket, which is a digital matte painting.
It's one of the smaller sequences in the movie because it's really just the very beginning and it's not many shots, not as many as other 3-minute sequences, for instance, that we have.